Hey there, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about one of the coolest things that I think we can find out in nature, which is fossils. But I want to ask you this before we get started. In your mind, what does the word fossil mean? Okay, so many of us when we hear the word fossil think of bones. You know, these are some fossils. And yeah, those are called body fossils, right? So body fossils are the remains of actual parts of an organism like bones or teeth or shells. But there's actually much more to it than just that. What about footprints? Yeah, those are fossils too. See, any part of an organism or any trace that an organism leaves behind can be preserved as a fossil if it's hard enough. Trace fossils are not just footprints either. They can be burrows like this one that was made by some kind of worm-like animal. These are coprolites, which are fossilized poop. That's also a trace fossil. Any part of a shell, even if it's just a fragment, can be considered a fossil. And even the fossilized poop of a dino doesn't seem out of place in this picture. And no, I have no idea what that thing is in the middle. This is all from one website. There's so many amazing fossils out there, and that's just a small sample. And then there's even more kinds of fossils like this, which I don't have names for, but I bet you've seen before. If you didn't know already, there's a lot more to fossils than just bones. And let's talk about how they form, because some of them can form in ways that we wouldn't expect. It's rare that we see animals fossilized while they're doing something. But here we have a fossil of a beetle that got trapped in amber while chasing after pollen. Amber is tree resin that hardened over time, and this trapped the little beetle forever. This is called permineralization. Sometimes we find fossils where it looks like the original material is still there, like in this petrified palm wood. But really, all of the organic material has been replaced by minerals, in this case, silicon dioxide. Over time, the water in the ground seeps through cracks in the wood, depositing minerals inside of the cells of the wood. Eventually, enough of the original material is gone, and it's replaced with minerals that we wouldn't even know that it was wood in the first place unless we cut it open and saw the rings. But that's exactly how we know that this is petrified wood and not just a rock. This fossil is called a mold and cast fossil. Let me show you how it formed. So first, an organism died and was buried in sediment at the bottom of an ocean. Over time, the calcium carbonate in its shell dissolves away. This leaves behind a hollow space in the shape of the shell. Then later, minerals precipitate out of the water and fill in that empty space. What we end up with is a replica of the inside of the original shell, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Here's another example of a mold fossil. Here's a fossil of a leaf. Can you tell that it's a leaf? Not really, can you? Well, if we turn it sideways, we can see the imprint of the midrib and the way that the veins come off of it. And we can compare this to the leaf that it came from and see that it matches perfectly. That shows us that a lot of the time, these fossils aren't just rocks. They can be exact replicas of the original organism, which is just wild to me. Now let's talk about something that's wild to me. We can tell what the color of this fossil was when it was alive. Now I know this sounds crazy, but hear me out. Most fossils are some shade of brown or black because the original organic material has decomposed over time, leaving only the hard parts, which are usually this color. But sometimes we find fossils that retain their color. How can this be? Well, it's because the conditions just happen to be perfect. For example, this fossil was found in northern Canada. A long time ago, this area was covered by a shallow sea, and the water had a low oxygen content. So when the sea creature died and sank to the bottom, it didn't decompose as much as it would have if it were in an environment with lots of oxygen. Instead, iron sulfide precipitated out onto the body and hardened like a shell. This protected the soft parts of the animal and allowed them to be preserved in their original colors. It's literally a miracle that this happened. If conditions had been even slightly different, this wouldn't have happened, and we wouldn't have this incredible fossil. Speaking of conditions being just right, we can tell how an ecosystem functioned based on the fossils that we find in it. For example, if we found this fossil in a sandstone, we would know that the animal must have lived on land because sandstone forms above the water table. But if we found this fossil in a shale, We would know that it must have lived in the water because shale forms below the water table. But it's not just the type of rock that tells us about the environment. The type of fossil tells us a lot too. See, not all animals preserve well. Animals with shells or skeletons are more likely to fossilize than animals without them. This means that most of the fossils we find are of hard-bodied animals like this trilobite, which is a type of arthropod. This one is especially cool because we can see all of its legs, which is not something we see very often in fossils. When it was alive, it would have looked a lot like a modern horseshoe crab. And speaking of horseshoe crabs, did you know that they're actually more closely related to spiders than they are to crabs? Well, if you didn't know that, you're in luck because I have an entire video talking about it. We can learn a lot from fossils, but not nearly as much as we could if we had more of them. Unfortunately, we tend to only find large fossils like dinosaur bones, even though most ancient organisms were quite small. To put it simply, large fossils are just more impressive and more likely to catch someone's attention. But there's nothing wrong with appreciating big fossils. Look how cool this one is. This is the skull of a sauropod, which is a type of long-necked dinosaur. We can tell it's a sauropod because we can see where the neck would have connected. And look at how huge it is. If this guy took a bite out of you, I'm pretty sure that would hurt. But back to those small fossils, yeah, we don't find many of those. But every once in a while we do. Take this fossil, for example. Do you know what this is? Well, this is a mini marsupial lion. Wait, what? Yeah, a marsupial lion that's about the size of a house cat. The weird thing is that this fossil is only about 3,000 years old. This means that the conditions weren't quite right for fossilization to occur. Normally, 3,000 years is nowhere near enough time for fossilization to happen. But Australia is having a mega drought right now, and this drought has lasted for over a decade. During a drought, the water table goes down, and this exposes hard sediments like clay and limestone. This makes it easier for small fossils like this little guy to be discovered. This is the first time a fossil like this has ever been found. So this is really helping scientists learn more about the history of life in Australia. Fossilization is a rare event. It's estimated that fewer than 1 in 10 million animals will become fossilized. This means that finding a fossil is a pretty lucky event, but it's still more likely than finding a UFO. Speaking of which, do you believe in UFOs? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious. But anyways, fossils are super cool. We can learn so much from them, but there's still a lot we don't know. Like, how do we get that dinosaur out of the rock? Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It helps a lot. Thank you.